October 13th, 2013. Jasmine Santana, a marine science instructor at the Catalina Island Marine Institute, is snorkeling in Toyon Bay off the Southern California coast when she sees something silver beneath her in the water. She is perhaps 10-12 feet below the surface when the shape resolves. It isn't a rock. It isn't a piece of debris. It has an eye, large, dark, positioned just above a jaw that she can now see is open slightly, the way mouths fall open when the muscles that hold them shut have given out. She dives toward it. She gets close enough to confirm that it is real, and then she surfaces and waves for help. What she has found is an 18-foot oarfish, dead on the sand in the shallows, silver as a mirror, ribbon thin, laterally flat, so narrow that from the front it would be almost invisible, but from above, splayed against the pale sand in the shallow water, it's the most improbable thing Santana has ever seen. The body runs away from her in both directions. The red spines projecting from the crown of the head catch what light filters down through the water. She can see the full length of the dorsal fin, the dark spines running from the head all the way to where the tail narrows and disappears. She can't lift it. Nobody can lift it alone. It takes 15 staff members pulling together to drag the animal onto the beach. The measured length, 18 feet, 5.5 meters. The world record for an oarfish found on the California coast on that day. That image, 15 people hauling a single fish out of the California shallows, captures something essential about the giant oarfish and the relationship science has built with it over the past 250 years. Almost every introduction to this animal is also a funeral. The giant oarfish, Regalicus glesner, holds the title of the world's longest living bony fish. It appears in Guinness World Records. It has generated sea serpent legends across the Atlantic, Pacific, and Indian Oceans. Its photograph circulates reliably every few years after a new stranding, startling a new generation of people who can't believe the number. And yet, as marine scientist Mark Benfield and colleagues wrote in the Journal of Fish Biology in 2013, paradoxically, there are very few observations of these individuals from oceanic waters. Instead, most knowledge of oarfishes comes from dead or dying individuals when they surface. An analysis in Oceanography magazine was equally direct. Ichthyologists know little more about the oarfish today than they did when the first specimen was described in the scientific literature. That first description came in 1772. It was a carcass on a Norwegian beach. So has been almost everything since. Along the California coast, one of the better-studied marine environments on Earth, approximately 20 oarfish strandings or near-shore appearances had been documented in total since 1901, before the most recent addition. The August 2024 La Jolla specimen, recovered by kayakers, was the 21st. The global count, while no single peer-reviewed paper has formally assembled it from primary records, amounts to a few hundred encounters across all temperate coastlines in recorded history. For the world's longest bony fish, that is a record thin enough to read through. The animal isn't rare because it's scarce. Its eggs have been found from New Zealand to the Gulf of Mexico to the western North Pacific. The IUCN lists it as least concern. The current suspicion among researchers is that it is relatively common in oceanic waters worldwide. The animal is invisible because it lives where we can't follow it, and it comes to the surface only in the moment it's already failing. The question this opens, what forces a deep animal up into the light right before it dies, is the spine of everything that follows. Regalicus glesner's body is unlike almost anything else in the ocean at this size. The form is ribbon-shaped, flat, compressed laterally, so narrow that from the front the fish presents nearly no profile at all, a vertical silver line against darker water. The skin carries no scales. Instead, a coating of guanine crystals laid over small tubercles gives the surface its metallic sheen, that silver foil quality that makes stranded specimens look almost manufactured. The coloration is silver and blue across the flanks, with irregular, dark, wavy markings and scattered spots. The belly is pale. A dorsal fin runs the entire length of the fish, from just behind and above the relatively large eyes, all the way to where the tail tapers to a fine point, comprising between 414 and 449 individual fin rays. The first 10 to 12 of those rays are dramatically elongated, projecting upward above the head as a red crest, flaps of skin with reddish spots at the tips, the whole structure fanning and trembling with the animal's smallest movements, like a flame above the waterline. Naturalist Carl Schuker described the combination as a face like a horse, a crest of brilliant red quills like an Indian brave's headdress. The pelvic fins extend outward and downward like a pair of oars, widening at the tip into paddle shapes, which is almost certainly where the common name originates. The confirmed maximum documented length is 7 to 8 meters, approximately 23 to 26 feet, established across multiple peer-reviewed sources and textbooks including The Diversity of Fishes, Nelson et al., 2016, and the Australian Museum's reviewed specimen records. Maximum recorded weight stands at 272 kilograms, roughly 600 pounds. Older claims of 17 meters, which appeared in early Guinness editions and circulated for decades, are now considered very likely inaccurate by modern syntheses. An 8-meter oarfish is still longer than 2 full-size sedans placed end to end, with a body width at its thickest point roughly comparable to a human torso, except that the thickest point barely reaches that, and the tail tapers to almost nothing across the remaining 15 feet of length. That disproportion, the extreme ratio of length to width, is what makes even the accurate number feel implausible. The fish looks like something that shouldn't be able to exist under ordinary physical laws. Serial autotomy, the self-amputation of the tail, appears to happen routinely throughout the animal's life. Every captured Regalecus over 1.5 meters shows evidence of autotomized tails. The break can involve only the caudal fin, or, in extreme cases, most of the body posterior to the vent. The organs are concentrated toward the front of the animal, so these amputations leave the fish functionally intact, the wound healing cleanly. The fish can lose half its body length and survive. It happens more than once across a lifetime. Why the amputations occur is genuinely unknown. The animal has no documented natural predators that would trigger a defensive tail loss response. The occurrence is recorded. The explanation isn't. The family Regalecidae contains 3 species in 2 genera. Regalecus glesni is the giant, the record holder, the king of herrings, a name that may derive from its crown-like dorsal crest or from the old fisherman's belief that it guided shoals of herring from below. Regalecus russellii, Russell's oarfish, sometimes called the slender oarfish, is slightly smaller. The largest confirmed specimen measured 5.4 meters, and it's the species most frequently encountered in Japanese waters. The two can be distinguished by the number of rays in the second dorsal fin crest, 11 in R. glesni, 1 in R. russellii, and by proportions of the jaw and abdomen. The third member of the family is Agrostichthys parkeri, the streamerfish, sole species of its genus, reaching perhaps 3 meters and known from only a handful of confirmed specimens, distributed in southern ocean waters roughly between 25 and 59 degrees south latitude. Known from a handful of specimens. The rarity of the rarest fish in a family that specializes in rarity. All 3 species in the family share one critical anatomical feature. None possesses a swim bladder. The implications of that absence for why oarfish appear at the surface when dying aren't what most people assume. Western science's formal introduction to this animal came in 1772. It was a dead fish on a Norwegian beach. Norwegian biologist Peter Eskenius described and named Regalecus glesna in the second part of his illustrated natural history work, Icones Rerum Naturalium, based on a dead specimen that had washed ashore at a farm called Glesvær, the older spelling Glesnes, near Bergen on the southwestern Norwegian coast. The species name Glesner is derived directly from that stranding location. Bergen's latitude is about 60 degrees north. The North Sea is cold, the beaches are exposed, and the animal lying on that beach in 1772 would have been in better condition for examination than most tropical strandings allow. Ascanius made the best of what the water had delivered. The year before, in 1771, the Danish zoologist Morten Træner Brünich, born in Copenhagen in 1737, primarily known as a mineralogist and naturalist, had made a descriptive note about what appears to have been a comparable stranded fish on a Norwegian beach. That note is sometimes cited as the founding moment of oarfish science, and in a loose sense, it was the first written description in scientific literature. But the formal binomial description that named the species, the document that carries nomenclatural authority, belongs to Ascanius in 1772. His founding document is a report of a dead animal. That pattern hasn't materially changed across 250 years of subsequent study. To enter the scientific record, the oarfish has almost always had to die first. The sea serpent tradition predates Ascanius by centuries, and the oarfish is the most plausible explanation for a significant fraction of it. Scandinavian compilers of natural history were recording enormous serpentine sea creatures from Norwegian waters as early as the 16th century. Olaus Magnus, in 1555, documented sailors' accounts of great serpentine bodies in northern waters with hair-like or mane-like structures near the neck, a description that fits the oarfish dorsal crest, those first elongated red rays projecting above the waterline, more precisely than it fits any other known animal. Bishop Erik Pontoppidan of Bergen, writing in the 1750s, compiled reports of sea serpents from Norwegian waters said to reach 200 feet in length. His descriptions noted hair near the neck. By 1808, a creature reportedly 56 feet long had beached on the Orkney Islands in Scotland, which natural historian J.R. Norman later argued was almost certainly an oarfish. In 1860, a 16-foot animal washed onto a Bermuda beach, a creature, the local papers reported at the time, of the sea serpent class, before being identified and measured as an oarfish. The 56-foot Orkney figure, set against a confirmed maximum of 26 feet, shows precisely how the transmission worked. Fishermen tell a story. The listener adds feet. The listener becomes a teller. Every retelling grows the fish. The more interesting problem is underneath the joke. In August of 1817, Gloucester, Massachusetts, a fishing town north of Boston on Cape Ann, the harbor received reports of something in the water that didn't belong there. Over the course of several weeks, dozens of people saw a large, undulating, serpentine creature near the surface of the harbor and the bay outside it. Fishermen, dock workers, a ship's captain, a customs collector. What distinguished the Gloucester case from most sea monster reports was that the local learned society, the Linnaean Society of New England, and legal authorities conducted formal written interviews with multiple witnesses shortly after the sightings occurred. These were separate, individual depositions. Witnesses were questioned before being allowed to compare accounts with each other. They described, independently, the same creature. Extremely long, moving rapidly at the surface with a vertical undulating motion, head held slightly above the waterline, body behind it in a series of humps. Multiple witnesses estimated 40 to 50 feet or more, the number inflating, as it always does, but the morphological description converged. The proposed scientific name, Scoliophis atlanticus, was eventually synonymized with basking shark, which remains the preferred alternative explanation for the surface movements. Whether a basking shark produces the described head-up undulating surface profile is contested. Set the Gloucester testimony against Pontoppidan's Norwegian accounts, the Bermuda stranding, the Orkney beaching, multiple accounts from Pacific and Indian Ocean margins, and the same description keeps surfacing. A silver or dark ribbon-bodied creature of extraordinary length near the ocean surface, seen by witnesses in different countries, in different centuries, with no access to each other's testimony. Matching testimony across unconnected observers isn't the same thing as exaggeration. Exaggeration inflates numbers, and the numbers are definitely inflated, but it doesn't produce convergent descriptions of a specific and unusual body form from sailors who shared no common source text, no shared tradition, and sometimes no common ocean. The anatomy maps onto those descriptions with unusual precision. The silver guanine coating makes the body luminous at or near the surface, visible from a considerable distance in clear water. The crimson crest, those first 10 to 12 elongated dorsal rays projecting above the waterline, reads as a mane, a flame, a crown, depending on the angle and the fear level of the observer. The head is small and horse-shaped, with large eyes positioned just above the jaw, pointed slightly upward. When a dying oarfish floats horizontally at the surface, its dorsal fin undulating weakly along its full 26-foot length, trailing the red crest in the chop, what a sailor in a small boat sees has no available category in their experience except monster. The category monster is, under those conditions, the reasonable inference. Oarfish aren't the sole explanation for every sea serpent account ever recorded. Giant squid, basking sharks, groups of porpoises in line formation, and large eels have all been proposed for various specific cases. But as the leading candidate for a substantial portion of Atlantic and Pacific accounts spanning 4 centuries of maritime testimony, the case is solid. The 2016 episode of River Monsters dedicated to this question located 2 healthy living oarfish by finding a specific buoy anchored in roughly 1.5 miles of water off the coast of France in the Mediterranean Sea, near which previous sightings had been reported. Host Jeremy Wade, a biologist and angler, not a casual observer, entered the water after nightfall on his second attempt and encountered first one, then a second living oarfish, each estimated at roughly 15 feet. He described them as graceful and fast when they chose to move. When they rested near the buoy's vertical chain, both oarfish preferred to orient vertically, tails downward, heads up, barely moving. That preference for vertical orientation is the key to understanding everything else about this animal. The giant oarfish's apparent stillness, the way it hangs nearly motionless, a creature that measures 26 feet but seems to do almost nothing, isn't laziness. It's arithmetic. Regalicus glesni occupies the epipelagic to mesopelagic ocean layers, ranging from roughly 15 meters down to 1,000 meters, with most verified records in the upper few hundred meters. The deepest confirmed observation is 463 to 492 meters, recorded in the northern Gulf of Mexico by remotely operated vehicles working through the Serpent project, a collaboration between industrial ROV operators and academic researchers, had BP's Thunder Horse semi-submersible drilling platform operating over one of the deepest oil fields in the Gulf between 2008 and 2011. Mark Benfield of Louisiana State University led the analysis. 5 confirmed sightings of healthy Regalicus glesni at depths ranging from 38 meters to nearly 493 meters, documented in the Journal of Fish Biology in 2013. Those 5 encounters over 3 years of sustained ROV coverage at an active industrial platform constitute the most complete in-habitat video record of a living Regalicus glesni that science has assembled in its entire history. 5 observations, 3 years, 1 platform. The scarcity isn't a failure of methodology. It's the animal's answer to being looked for. The footage describes the same posture each time. The fish is vertical in the water column, head pointed upward, tail hanging below. One encounter, captured in the footage, showed an oarfish swimming in a columnar orientation, tail downward, in the mesopelagic layer. When the ROV approached too closely, the fish swam vertically downward, tail first, accelerating in a retreat that demonstrated the animal's capacity for rapid movement when threatened. Undisturbed, it had been doing almost nothing at all, undulating only its dorsal fin, holding position in water just above 450 meters deep, in darkness, in cold. Earlier in 2001, US Navy personnel inspecting a buoy in the Bahamas filmed a living oarfish, approximately 1.5 meters long, the first known video of a live regalicus in its natural environment. The footage showed amyform locomotion, the dorsal fin undulating rhythmically, while the body itself remained straight and nearly stationary. The fish moved by rippling its 400-plus fin rays, rather than bending its spine. That mode of movement, dorsal fin only, body rigid, uses far less energy than the lateral body undulation that powers most large fish. The body is held like a held breath, barely disturbing the water around it. To understand why the posture exists, you have to understand the food supply where this fish lives. The mesopelagic zone, conventionally 200 to 1,000 meters, receives perhaps 20% of the organic matter produced at the sunlit ocean surface. What arrives is largely marine snow, a slow, continuous drift of dead plankton, shed exoskeletons, fecal pellets, and bacterial aggregates sinking from above. The particles are fine. They fall at roughly 1 meter per hour in calm conditions. What looks from above like an abyss looks from within like a slow indoor snowfall in the dark. Euphausiid krill migrate vertically through this water column, rising at night to feed in surface waters, descending by day through the mesopelagic on their way back down. Small squid and jellyfish drift through the midwater. The food exists, but it's dispersed, intermittent, and sparse in caloric density per unit volume of water. To catch it with speed would cost more than it contains. Active pursuit is expensive in a way that can't be absorbed at depth. A large predatory fish that hunts by chasing prey, accelerating, course-correcting, sustaining speed, burns through muscle glycogen and fat reserves at a rate that deep water can't replenish. Deep-living pelagic fish as a group show measurable, depth-related declines in locomotory muscle enzyme activity, documented through studies of citrate synthase and lactate dehydrogenase, the enzymes that power muscular contraction, which fall significantly with depth across multiple fish families. The deeper you live, the less investment in the machinery of speed tends to survive selection. The deep ocean taxes speed severely and forgives stillness. Regalicus glesni takes this constraint to an extreme that is visible in the flesh. The meat is gelatinous, described by tasters as like paper, so flaccid and unpleasant in texture that a dog accustomed to eating fish rejected it outright. And 6 people who agreed to try fried oarfish reported that, while the taste was tolerable, the flesh was extremely flaccid and overall objectionable. That gelatinous quality is a direct indicator of low myofibrillar density. Very little of the dense, energy-intensive contractile muscle tissue that powers the fast turns and sustained sprints of active predators like tuna or mako sharks. Oarfish build little muscle mass. This isn't a coincidence or a deficit. It's the fiscal logic of an environment where building and maintaining muscle costs more than the available prey can fund. The animal is carrying exactly as much muscle as its environment can afford to grow. The vertical posture resolves this constraint in several directions at once. Fishbase describes oarfish as often suspended head up in clear oceanic or inshore waters, slowly undulating only the dorsal fin, keeping the body straight and rigid. The Florida Museum's description is precise. The oarfish floats vertically in the water column to camouflage itself, trailing the elaborate red first spines of its dorsal fin, and has been observed swimming vertically in what is believed to be a method by which the fish searches for prey items. The logic of that posture is optical. Facing upward through the mesopelagic twilight, anything between the fish and the faint downwelling light from above appears as a silhouette, visible, targetable, distinct. A horizontal oarfish looking sideways sees the same featureless dark in every direction. A vertical oarfish looking upward sees its prey outlined against the sky. At the same time, the narrow silver profile oriented vertically becomes nearly invisible from below or from the side. A vertical line, edge on, against the diffuse light coming down. The silver lateral surfaces that would be a large reflective target when horizontal become a near invisible edge when vertical. Camouflage and hunting posture achieved simultaneously at metabolic cost approaching zero. The prey this strategy is designed to intercept is primarily euphausiid krill. Stomach content analyses of stranded specimens, which constitute virtually the entire dietary record since no feeding event has ever been directly observed in the wild, show krill as the dominant and most consistently verified prey. The Australian Museum, reviewing verified stomach contents through Tyson Roberts' 2012 monograph on the genus, states that all verified cases consisted of krill. One California specimen's stomach contained approximately 10,000 individual euphausiid krill. Not a single large prey item. 10,000 small ones, each perhaps a centimeter long, accumulated not through chase, but through suction. The fish opening its protrusible jaw, drawing water inward, filtering what it needs through the gill rakers. Benching itself in the mesopelagic layer while the krill migration passes through it. Active hunting would cost more calories than the krill carry. The oarfish evolved to let the krill come to it, and the krill come every day, sinking from above, on schedule. The full picture, vertical posture, dorsal fin-only amiform locomotion, suction feeding on drifting prey, gelatinous flesh, minimal fast-twitch muscle, self-amputating tail to shed dead weight, is the metabolic logic of an enormous animal surviving in a food-scarce environment. The size isn't a contradiction of the strategy. Larger bodies have lower mass-specific metabolic requirements than small ones. An 8-meter oarfish burns fewer calories per kilogram of body mass than a tuna burning fuel at pursuit speed. The ribbon shape minimizes the metabolic overhead of simply maintaining that body in the water column. What looks, from above, like a passive and featureless existence is actually an extraordinarily refined solution to an energy equation that most fish never have to face. The cost is total invisibility. You can't trawl for something hanging vertically in open mid-water. You can't detect it reliably from above. The 5 Gulf of Mexico encounters were the product of years of sustained industrial ROV operations at a specific platform. And even then, the fish materialized by chance in the camera's path. Everything else in the scientific record was assembled from animals that had already failed. The surface appearances, then, represent a failure of everything the oarfish's biology was designed to prevent. When an adult oarfish arrives at or near shore, alive but barely, or dead, or in the last hours of dying, it has left the only environment it was built for. Coastal shallows are turbulent, pressure variable, and current active in a way that mesopelagic midwater isn't. A fish adapted to dead calm, cold, stable water, a fish that builds as little muscle as it can survive with, encounters surge, undertow, thermoclines, and coastal current at a moment when its locomotor capacity has already been compromised. The shallows finish whatever sickened the animal started. The absence of a swim bladder eliminates the most common explanation for deep-sea fish appearing at the surface. Barotrauma, the gas expansion that forces fish with swim bladders upward when pressure decreases, does not apply here. Oarfish have no gas organ to rupture or expand. Depth control is entirely muscular, maintained by continuous low-energy fin movement. When that muscular control degrades through illness, disease, heavy parasite burden, or physical injury, the animal drifts passively upward, carried by whatever slight positive buoyancy its gelatinous tissues provide, until it reaches the surface zone, where the turbulence it can't fight completes the process. The fish rises because it can no longer prevent rising. Proposed triggers for that initial degradation include illness and organ failure, heavy tapeworm loads. Necropsied specimens have been found hosting significant numbers of tetraphilidian pleurocercoids of the genus Clistobothrium throughout the viscera. A 2015 study in the Journal of Parasitology titled Monsters of the Sea Serpent parasites of an oarfish, documented numerous such tapeworm larvae in a Regalicus russellii specimen from Catalina Island. Storm disturbance that could displace the water column, temperature anomalies, and upwelling events that push deep water towards shore, potentially carrying disoriented fish closer to the coast than their limited muscle propulsion can counter. None of these hypotheses has been confirmed as the primary cause across multiple specimens. Each necropsy adds a piece. None has completed the picture. The 2024 La Jolla examination shows exactly where the science stands. On the morning, kayakers and snorkelers in La Jolla Cove encountered a dead oarfish at the surface. Short-crested, silver, 12.25 feet long, 74.3 pounds. They flagged it, contacted authorities, and the fish was transported to the NOAA Fisheries Southwest Fisheries Science Center. On August 16th, a team assembled. Ichthyologist Ben Frabel and marine biologist Diana Arcila from UC San Diego's Scripps Institution of Oceanography, Associate Professor Misty Paig Tran, and 3 graduate students from California State University Fullerton, and 2 researchers from NOAA Fisheries. They laid the specimen out. They measured it. They photographed the long red dorsal crest, 2.17 feet of it projecting from the top of the head alone. They noted the scaleless silvery body with dark spots, the stubby pectoral fins, the single-rayed pelvic fins. They cut into it, sampled it, took tissue for the first chromosome-level genome of the world's longest bony fish, extracted stable isotope material to reconstruct dietary history, collected gill raker material to describe the filter-feeding anatomy. The fish was in good condition. It wasn't clear why the fish had died. Scientists also didn't know why it had washed up where it did. That single finding, good condition, no clear cause of death, no explanation for the stranding, is perhaps the most honest summary of where oarfish science stands after 250 years. The 2024 specimen was the 21st oarfish documented along the California coast since 1901. Fresh specimen, 3 institutions, multiple specialists. No answer. Then Frabel noted that La Jolla Shores sits adjacent to 2 underwater canyons that funnel deep water unusually close to shore, which may partly explain the geography. But explaining where Deep Sea Canyon is nearby isn't the same as explaining where the fish was dying. The tissue samples will build toward a chromosome-level reference genome. The cause of death remains unresolved. In Japan, the ambiguity acquires a different weight entirely. Regalicus russellii has a specific name in Japanese tradition, Ryugu no Tsukai, Lugu no Tsukai, translating as messenger from the sea god's palace, or the messenger from the dragon palace beneath the waves. The dragon palace sits at the bottom of the sea in the oldest versions of the tradition, and the oarfish is the creature that crosses from that world into this one. When it comes ashore, the tradition holds, something is being communicated. The message isn't good. From December 2009 through March 2010, unusual numbers of the slender oarfish appeared in the waters and on beaches along the Sea of Japan coast. About 20 oarfish were reported stranded or encountered in the area during that period. Winter months, cold water, an unusual frequency that prompted a Kyodo news report in March 2010, noting widespread puzzlement among marine experts. The phrase captures the mood of that moment accurately. Puzzlement rather than alarm, professional uncertainty. The kind of attention that says, this is strange, but does not yet know why. On March 11th, 2011, 14 months after those strandings, a magnitude 9.0 earthquake struck off the Pacific coast of Japan's Tohoku region. The seafloor ruptured along a 500-kilometer fault. The tsunami that followed reached heights of up to 40 meters at certain points on the coastline. Approximately 19,747 people were killed or reported missing. Nearly 20,000. In the aftermath, Many in Japan pointed to the winter of 2009 to 2010. The fish had come ashore. The tradition said to watch for exactly this. The messenger had arrived. In 2019, researchers published a formal statistical test in the Bulletin of the Seismological Society of America. The team, led by Oki and colleagues, examined records of oarfish and related deep-sea fish appearing near Japan from 1928 through 2011. 83 years of data. They tested for earthquakes occurring within 30 days and 100 kilometers of each stranding. The result? No statistically significant correlation. The relationship between deep-sea fish strandings and subsequent earthquakes, the study concluded, is an illusory correlation, a pattern that the human mind generates from events that are coincident in time but causally unrelated. That is the scientific finding, and it's an honest one. Across the full record, the strandings don't reliably precede earthquakes. When researchers applied the statistical tools designed to detect true correlations, none appeared. What the study can't do is explain why approximately 20 oarfish came ashore along the Sea of Japan coast in the specific winter before the most destructive seismic event in Japan's modern history. It can't tell us whether the months-long accumulation of pre-seismic stress, the slow micro-fracturing of a subduction zone working its way toward a magnitude 9.0 release, could generate pressure waves, electromagnetic changes, or shifts in the deep water column detectable to animals living in the mesopelagic layer in ways that current scientific instrumentation does not capture. No proposed mechanism has been confirmed. No proposed mechanism has been ruled out by direct measurement. The 2019 paper tested the pattern against the historical record and found it unreliable. Unreliable isn't the same as mechanistically impossible. The Ryugu no Tsukai tradition is centuries older than the statistical test. It accumulated across generations of people who lived close enough to the sea to observe strandings and close enough to the ground to feel what followed them. The tradition may reflect the same kind of unreliable but not zero signal that the statistical test measured and rejected. Science can't currently close the question in either direction. The fish came ashore in those months. The ground broke. The water followed. The reason those animals were on those beaches in those particular weeks remains, in any causal sense, genuinely unknown. The monster the sailors feared is real. It's a little shorter than the old stories claimed. Old stories always claim more than the truth contains, but the body itself was never an invention. The silver ribbon, the red crest, the horse-shaped head, the way it undulates at the surface in the manner of something alive, or something recently stopped being alive. None of that was fabricated. Independent witnesses in Massachusetts and Norway and Bermuda and Orkney described the same animal without knowing each other. The convergence is real. Only the number was wrong. What should hold our attention, genuinely hold it, not merely impress it, isn't that a fish this large exists. It's that an animal this large can spend an entire life in the dark water column, hanging vertical in the mesopelagic layer, barely moving, filtering krill from the slow drift of marine snow, self-amputating its own tail when circumstances require, and remain, after 250 years of formal scientific inquiry, conducted by named institutions using the best tools their era provided, almost entirely beyond our understanding of how it lives. Every adult oarfish found at the surface is almost certainly dying or already dead. The Catalina Island fish that took 15 people to drag ashore in October 2013. The fish that Jasmine Santana found by chance while snorkeling in a shallow bay on a Monday morning never yielded a conclusive cause of death. The La Jolla specimen, necropsied by 3 institutions in August 2024, was in good condition when the team opened it, and its cause of death wasn't clear. The science gathers around each body, collects what it can, and departs without the answer it came for. The only moments science has seen this animal alive, truly alive, healthy in its own environment, are 5 ROV encounters, accumulated over 3 years at a single drilling platform in the Gulf of Mexico, and 1 Navy diver's footage of a 1.5-meter juvenile at a buoy in the Bahamas in 2001. The vertically hanging, dorsal fin rippling, nearly motionless animal in those images had been there before the cameras arrived. It will be there after they leave. That is the animal's answer to our observation. Patience, depth, and the knowledge that if it stays still long enough, we will go away. The image that should stay with you isn't the sea serpent, though the sea serpent was real. It's Toyon Bay on an October morning in 2013. A marine science instructor, snorkeling in the shallows, sees a large silver eye in the water below her. She dives toward it. She finds 18 feet of silver ribbon on the sand, the red crown of elongated spines trailing in the mild current, the large dark eyes open. She has found the largest oarfish recorded in California up to that point. She found it dead. The science that followed told us almost nothing about why it was there. That is the whole story of this animal, repeated across every temperate coastline in the world for as long as anyone has been keeping records. Subscribe for more stories like this.